Of course, the BBC couldn't quite bring themselves to celebrate it in the way that most normal people would, and the Hamas characters managed to find their uniforms again. They're so brave, aren't they? They put those masks on so you can't tell who they are. They put the green bandana on and they wave guns around and they all hang about together. It's all very weird, all very strange. Let's talk to Ben Habib, former Deputy Leader of Reform UK, of course. Ben, very good morning to you.
Good morning, mate.
So, it can be done. You know, suddenly Donald Trump doesn't even have to get into power before he puts a bit of pressure on Netanyahu, a bit of pressure on Hamas, and suddenly now we've got some young women being back with their families again. It's a fantastic day, isn't it?
It's a fantastic outcome, and I mean, we're all obviously delighted for peace in the Middle East, and I very much hope that this ceasefire will hold and that the subsequent hostage negotiations that have to take place, because I think the first phase is agreed with 30-odd hostages being released, but after that, I think there's a matter of having to agree the rate at which they're released and who's released and the number of prisoners that the Palestinians get in return from Israel. So it's going to be quite a fraught process, I suspect, as we move forward. But, you know, it might be a good moment just to reflect on what Israel has achieved during the last 14, 15 months, which is effectively the complete political neutralization of Hezbollah, the neutering of Iran in many respects as a power broker and, you know, the force behind these proxies in the Middle East, and also the beginning of the breaking of the Houthi rebels, not to mention the significant damage obviously made to Hamas.
Right.
I think what was, if there's any kind of disappointment for me personally, looking at what happened yesterday in Gaza, was the strength that Hamas seemingly still have. You know, as you say, they came out with their uniforms back on, but they all looked incredibly healthy, these fighters. You know, well armed with body armor and everything else.
Whatever happened to that famine that kept apparently looming on the horizon? You know, every bleeding week for about a year there was going to be a famine. You know, and isn't it disgraceful that the Red Cross, you know, one of the lefty, you know, charities apparently, never bothered to go and visit these hostages while they were incarcerated in those tunnels, not once.
No, not once. And I mean, I really would have liked to have seen Hamas a shadow of its former self, but it looks like trouble in Gaza is going to continue. Anyway, peace is a good thing. And I was delighted, as you were too, to see that those young ladies look remarkably healthy. You know, who'd have thought that after, what did you say, 400 odd days?
471 days, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time to be underground, isn't it?
It's just awful. Just awful. And we know from the other hostages that have been released that they were all mistreated badly. They were sexually assaulted, no doubt. You know, some of them were pregnant when they came out before these three did. So, you know, absolutely disgusting and disgraceful behaviour from these characters. There was a great piece in the Sunday Times written yesterday about what happens now in Gaza, and they reckon that only about 16% of the people of Gaza would now vote for Hamas if there was actually an election. So there's going to be a sort of diplomatic effort, I suppose, coming from the Trump side as well, to try and enforce a different view from Hamas. You know, somebody else has to run Gaza, because if Hamas is still running it, there's never going to be peace.
I mean, you've hit the nail absolutely on the head. And what needs to emerge from this, assuming Hamas is a weakened political and military force, is an intervention from the West so that Gaza is produced in our image, not in Hamas's image.
Right.
You know, so we rebuild their institutions, making sure as much as possible that they're free of these kind of militant extremist terrorist elements. I don't know whether that's going to be possible or not, but that has to be an aim. You know, when you look at our interventions in other parts of the Middle East, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Iraq, they've been bad because we've had no joined up thinking about what happens after our military bombardments or our military, you know, boots on the ground.
Right.
And it's that second phase that's so important for world peace and making sure that we don't have the, you know, resurgence of violence again. And I really hope we have some joined up thinking on what happens now that, you know, this seems to be coming to an end.
Well, I don't know if we can rely on the Labour Party for any of that, because, of course, David Lammy thinks he should be arresting Benjamin Netanyahu if he steps foot in Britain. And also, let's have a look at these two characters, right? These two bozos from the weekend. There was a pro-Palestinian march on Saturday. 77 arrests, amongst them people who were pushing into an area which they were told not to go into because there was a synagogue there in Great Portland Street. Have a look at who was there. John McDonnell, the former Shadow Chancellor, and Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of the Labour Party, both there, both who are now being sought by the police for questioning. Let's have a look at what they were getting up to on Saturday as part of the march. They were part of the group of people who were pushing their way through. You can see John McDonnell there trying to push his way through the line. And nothing yesterday, by the way, from Jeremy Corbyn. He's got lots of tweets out about the Palestinian march, but nothing about how happy he would be that the hostages have now been released.
No, I mean, it's typical. And what you know, there have been two dimensions to this conflict, haven't there? There's been the military conflict in the Middle East, but we've had our own problems in the UK, and they're not entirely of the same root. I think what we've been seeing in the UK with these marches are really the root of those marches. It's something more malign. You know, it's a kind of anti-British sentiment that runs through these marches.
Yeah.
And to see Jeremy Corbyn and John marching alongside these people who are basically anti-British, right, anti the values and culture, you know, of this country.
And they're anti-Israeli as well.
I mean, they're obviously anti-Israeli. I mean, they want to wipe Israel out for whatever they say. They want Israel to cease to exist.
Right.
But to see people who potentially might have been our Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Exchequer,
oh my God,
marching alongside them,
right,
it just tells you how wrong we've gone as a country.
Absolutely.
And you know, why aren't these people actually now doing collections of money for the rebuilding of Gaza instead of marching up and down the streets, gesticulating violently at policemen and wasting taxpayers' money? Why aren't they doing something positive for the rebuilding of Gaza?
Well, do you remember, you know, back in the day when October 7th happened and the first sort of pro-Palestine marches happened that very day? The first one happened on October the 7th, you know, anti-Israel march after that horrible day of massacring and hostage-taking. They were calling for a ceasefire, right? And they've been calling for a ceasefire for the best part of a year and a half. And now that there is a ceasefire, they're not happy.
No, they're still marching,
right,
which tells you it's actually more than just about Israel.
Yeah.
This is a divide in British society. These flags, the Palestinian flags that they flaunt as they go on these marches, it's really an anti-British sentiment.
It is.
They're not really supporting Palestine. I don't think these people give two hoots about the Palestinians. It's their domestic political issues in the United Kingdom, and they're using Palestine as a conduit to express those anti-British sentiments. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And you know, I imagine I may not be the majority view, but that's what I see in these Palestinian marches. Deeply anti-British, actually.
Yes, I think you are. I think you are a part of the majority view, actually. But let's have a look at what the BBC makes of it all. I was shocked. I don't know if you watched it yesterday. Laura Kunsberg, who up until recently has been relatively sensible, completely lost the plot yesterday. Couldn't understand why anybody would trust Donald Trump. Couldn't understand why anybody would be happy that Donald Trump was going to be the next president. Also, continually refused to refer to Hamas as a terrorist organisation. Have a look at this.
At 9:15 British time, the ceasefire is now in force. Hamas, the group that's prescribed by many governments around the world, has revealed the names of the 3 hostages they are releasing today.
Hamas, the group that's prescribed by many countries around the world.
Yeah,
as I said earlier, surely it would be simpler and more journalistically correct to refer to them as the terrorist group Hamas. I mean, that would be simple, wouldn't it?
That would be simple. But, I mean, they've got real issues, haven't they? They've tied themselves up. And again, it's a kind of... Again, I come back to it, Mike. It's an anti-British sentiment that's running through. And, you know, I heard Shirley, the former MP from the Israeli parliament you had on earlier, and she said, what if the United Kingdom was surrounded by countries that wanted to destroy it? Well, actually, we have a pretty anti-pathetic European Union across the channel that isn't wholly friendly, but we've got elements in the United Kingdom, including, in my view, the Prime Minister of this country, who harbour very anti-British views.
They do.
Who don't really care about this country, who want to see us punished for some peculiar historic problems that they've got with the country or some kind of mental issues they've got themselves. I just don't get it.
Well, do you remember when that brilliant Israeli operation to get rid of Hezbollah happened, and they had the pages all blowing up, and they're all standing in supermarkets getting blown up? And it was pointed out to me by somebody actually in Lebanon who has family in Lebanon, who said, isn't it weird that I've come to live in London where Hezbollah are more popular than they are in Lebanon?
Yeah.
You know, because the Lebanese people don't want Hezbollah anywhere near running the country, and they're very happy that Israel has taken them out. But in London, you've got people marching up and down waving banners for Hezbollah.
Absolutely. I mean, Lebanon was a really peaceful country until Hezbollah, until 1978. Hezbollah and the emergence of extreme Islamism and anti-Israeli sentiment. It was a settled, peaceful, prosperous. Beirut was a first-class city. Yeah. So they know exactly, how this goes if you let elements like Hezbollah out of control. Hezbollah, I think, have something like 15% of the seats in the Lebanese parliament, but they effectively run the country because they are the threat. They are forceful. They are the belligerent ones. Yeah. And
they're the guys with the guns, right?
They're the guys with the guns, exactly.
And
it's very sad. It's very sad.
It really is. And I'm so pleased that Israel's done what it's done. And let's hope that with the emergence of Donald Trump now as the 47th president, they can really start sorting that area out.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, even before taking office, he managed to bring enough pressure to bear to bring peace to the Middle East. And I hope he uses the same kind of pressure in Ukraine. We need peace in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is not going to end with an outright victory.
No.
We need a negotiated settlement. And Europe needs to understand that. Europe, having been so slow to sanction Russia, some parts of Europe still buying Russian oil, nevertheless banging the drum for an outright, complete 100% victory for Zelensky. And down that road lies massive monetary commitment by the European Union and the United Kingdom and the West, and massive more death. And so I hope Trump delivers on his promise that he's going to bring peace there too. And to his credit, and we must remember this, last time he was president, he started no wars.
Right.
Now, you might think that's an unremarkable comment for an American president, but actually most American presidents start a war of some sort when they're in office.
They do.
And Trump's not of that disposition. So I hope that can be resolved as well.
Absolutely right. Ben, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Ben Habib, the former Deputy Leader of Reform UK. We're going to talk some more about Donald Trump coming up with Bob McEwen, a former Republican congressman. Trump doesn't like war. Piers Morgan was on BBC yesterday saying exactly that, and he knows Trump better than most people. And he said, no, he thinks it's bad for business, and he thinks foreign places to send American troops are not welcome because American troops and American boys and girls get killed. And that's not good for the country.